Hey guys, Matt McNulty here. Welcome back to my channel. I'm a writer, journalist, reporter, and new YouTuber to the platform. So if you are new, welcome. If you enjoy this content and the content that I've produced thus far and intend to produce, make sure you hit the subscribe button, the like button, and all that good stuff. If not, thanks for stopping by. So let's get into it. This video is based off of the teaser that I posted a couple days back and is really going to get into the details of what goes on in the news industry, what goes on behind the scenes. Um, and I've worked at a lot of big places and a lot of big media outlets, and I think that might lend me a little bit of credibility as to why I have this channel and what I'm talking about. Uh, so I know that I've talked a little bit about a few big stories and interesting things that I've covered, but this is more about where I've worked and what went on behind the scenes and in the news industry as a whole, as I saw it and understand it. So, 2012, we'll just go right in chronological order. 2012, I got an internship and I started after moving to New York at the New York Daily News as a general assignment reporter. A little background before that, I was an English major in college. I had zero idea what I wanted to do. I knew I didn't want to teach, which is what everyone always asks English and history majors. I knew I didn't want to teach. I didn't go to school for journalism. I had no intention on pursuing journalism, really. I just knew that I wanted to write, I guess, in some abstract sense, and that I wanted and needed to get paid for it. So the best way and the only way to make a living with writing, unless you're a very famous fiction writer, is to be a reporter, a journalist, is to take those skills and apply it to the news industry. So, I kind of fell into it that way. I started with like a 6 month internship at the New York Daily News, which is a pretty big New York paper. It's got a pretty big presence here. It's an institution really in the city. It's been around for like 100 plus years. You go on the subway, you see people reading it every morning on their way to work. Or maybe you used to. A lot of it's now digital, and the Daily News has a great digital product. It's on par there. The Daily News, I mean the Daily Mail, really they're great at you could call it just like aggregation content farming. That they get stories from all over the world that are interesting, that pique people's interest. They have a really great digital product. But I started as what you would call a cub reporter, a stringer, a general assignment reporter. They sent me to scenes, crime scenes, press conferences. This is 2012. Occupy Wall Street was going on, and that was a big thing. I did a lot of covering that. Um, Katie Holmes, the actress, was in a process of getting a divorce from Tom Cruise. She lived in Chelsea, downtown Manhattan, so there was a lot of that going on. I was working on. I even got a chance to interview Heidi Klum, the supermodel. She was starting a line of like children's clothing and they were doing a press event at the Toys R Us, the big Toys R Us in Manhattan. So, I got a chance to cover some big things. I remember specifically my first byline ever, not just at the Daily News, but the first time my name was ever printed in conjunction with a story ever was they sent me to a crime. It was a crime story about a New York City bus driver who beat up some high school track star or whatever. So they sent me this guy and his family. The bus driver lived in Harrison, New York, which if you know anything about New York City, this is in Westchester. I did not have a car, and they sent me all the way up there. It would be like a 45-minute drive if you had a car, which I didn't. They just said, go here, knock on this door, see what you can get. So I think a lot of that first story was to test my mettle and see if I could even navigate physically, let alone, you know, uh, news wise, to get this story. And I took the Metro North, and I think I walked like a mile or so after I got off the train to get to this guy's family's house and knocked on the door. And I ended up getting some quotes, I think, from like his mother or an aunt or grandmother or something. This guy who had been um, bus driver who had been arrested for assaulting this high school student on his bus route. And I got some quotes, and I met up with the photographer, knocked on the door, got some quotes. He got some pictures. We filed that. Um, Woke up the next day, went down the street to my local bodega in Harlem and picked up a copy of the Daily News, opened it up, and there it was, my first byline, Matt McNulty. It had a big picture, it was a big, full page spread story, and my name was on it. It was really cool. It was an addicting feeling. And that feeling never goes away. Every time you get a byline, it's a pretty cool feeling. It never really gets old when you get your name in print and you see it every day, and there's thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands, maybe more, reading your work, your story. That's a cool feeling. It's a really cool feeling. So that kicked off what's been an 8+ year career ever since, really, in the news industry. I was at the Daily News for about, like, it was like a 6-month internship, and then I managed to parlay that into a career at the Daily News's biggest competitor, which is the New York Post, and they're similar in the fact that they're kind of New York tabloid stories. They cover a lot of, like crime, like tabloid stories, like whatever's big, sensational, crazy stories, they'll cover it. So when I was at the New York Post, I started as a general assignment reporter, much like I had been at the Daily News, and then I got, I guess you could call it like a promotion or whatever, where I ended up being moved to the uh, police bureau, the crime bureau, which meant that I was then going to be working specifically and directly out of One Police Plaza in downtown Manhattan, which is NYPD headquarters. So I had to get, clearance to get a building pass for NYPD headquarters downtown, and I worked out of NYPD headquarters for like 3 years in this little area that's probably still there. They call it the Shack, and it's exactly what it sounds like. It's like a ramshackle type, like a kind of corridor in NYPD headquarters on the second floor there, where you kind of have couple offices. They're very old school offices. You got the New York Post, the Daily News, I think the New York Times, and maybe Newsweek there, a couple each with their own separate little tiny office. And yeah, and I worked 6 p.m. till 2 a.m. was my shift. So I was working by myself with one other guy down the hall in his office for the Daily News, covering crime on their end, which is basically whatever he was covering, I was covering, and whatever I was covering, he was covering, or she was covering. Um, and yeah, I worked that as, a lot of that was um, listening to police radio, but it wasn't listening in the old school convention. I didn't actually have like a police radio, or a fire radio where I was listening in on their actual radio. But there's something called BNN, which is Breaking News Network, and pretty much any of the big news industries and big reporters will have that. And it's basically like an emailing system that they take transmissions from police and firefighters and EMTs, and they take those radio transmissions and they send them in short little emails. So, my New York Post work email account had like tens of thousands of emails, and it was almost all BNN. You'd get them as they came, so you could get a couple a minute, you could get one every few minutes, but that's what you did. You would just click refresh, see every time there was a new BNN email alert, and they would usually just be pretty bare bones. It would be like triple homicide, Queens, 2 code reds, 1 code orange to Elmhurst Hospital, stab wounds, um, whatever, and then you would follow up on it, and you would call the NYPD and say, "Hey, listen, I heard that there's some type of incident going on in Queens. Is there anything you could tell me about it?" And as the story develops, they usually give you more throughout the night, but they might say something. We have one in custody, and then you would call the FDNY, and they would confirm, we had 3 code reds with stab wounds taken to Elmhurst Hospital in critical condition. The time that they were brought there, or the incident happened, was this was the address it happened at, and you'd start kind of compiling the story from there. And that was really what my job entailed. I didn't really do a whole lot of like street reporting. They had a street reporter that would kind of report to me, and they would be sent to a scene that I would tell the editors, "Hey, BNN says that there's like a big fire on 51st Street, and they would send a reporter and a photographer there, and then the reporter and I would talk and say, hey, listen, I spoke to a witness, he said this, that, and that, and I would, put the story together, and voila. At the Post, I also did a lot of stuff like the police blotter, which, is for the newspaper and also for the web, but in the paper, there's like a big police blotter with all 5 boroughs. It'd be like some interesting crime, just quick hit stuff. I was in charge of compiling the police blotter, and yeah, it was cool. It was a lot of fun. But one thing I really want to stress, and obviously this channel has a strong focus on journalism and reporting, being in how that's what my life has been for almost the past decade now, and I guess is probably what I'm the most of an expert on, if I'm an expert on anything, I guess, is you know why is a certain story even get reported on and others wouldn't? Because there's crimes that happen everywhere, every second, every day. Why is one more interesting? Why does one deserve to get more news play than others? And this goes for pretty much any newspaper, news outlet, news organization. I'm not singling anyone out in particular, but I think this is pretty much applicable for the New York institutions and outlets that I've worked for. Is how do I put this? So let's say a news story or a crime or something that happened in maybe East New York or Brownsville, Brooklyn, which is like high crime area. There's a little bit more poverty out there. That story would probably get very little play, if any. But if that same story or crime happened on 59th Street or the Upper East Side, the Upper West Side, you're talking about a front page story possibly. I want people to keep that in mind, whether you want to become a journalist or you're thinking about becoming a reporter, or you just have an interest in news in general. If you're a news junkie, if you have any interest in the industry whatsoever, this is something that I really want people to understand as the channel grows and develops, and as we discuss more of this topic, journalism, my experiences and stories I've covered, is that I would say, okay, there's a story that happened in maybe a certain neighborhood in Queens. Really outer borough stuff. It was hit and miss, and that doesn't make it right. News is news, and it should be treated as equally across the board, but it's not. And again, a story that happens on the Upper West Side is instantly more newsworthy than a story that happens in the outer boroughs, which are historically and just socio-economically speaking, a lot more minorities, maybe a lower income level, and that doesn't make it right. Those people's stories need to be told, and I felt compelled while I was working at these places to get those stories out there and to fight for those stories. And in different videos, we'll talk more about some of the stories that I covered that were not very popular within the newsroom, and that I had to fight very hard to get any work done on it whatsoever, and even getting it into paper or online. We'll get into some stories in the next few videos of some of the more unpopular stories I had to fight for, that I thought were important, but my editors or the powers that be in the newsroom, the shot callers, did not really have much of an interest in whatsoever. So that's something that I really think is an important point to make before I move on about just news gathering and just the news industry in general. Why are you reading the story that you're reading? Because of location, because of the area that it happened in, but does that make it more newsworthy than that same story that happened elsewhere? I don't necessarily think so. From the New York Post, I was there for a good 3 to 3.5 years, working out of the police bureau in NYPD headquarters. And then from there, I took kind of a little bit of a meandering, maybe a year or so. I did some work covering some UFC stuff, which is also going to be a part of this channel. UFC is Ultimate Fighting Championship, MMA, mixed martial arts. It's just something I've been a fan of, since I was like in college or high school. And I got a chance to do some sports reporting. And while I was at the Post, I did some MMA stuff as well for the sports desk. But just a personal interest, and I got a chance to write for it after I left the Post as well. I worked for like BJ Penn.com. BJ Penn is a former UFC lightweight champion, and he had his own MMA news website that I worked for, SureDog.com, which is another big MMA UFC news website. And I got a chance to interview a lot of fighters and go to a lot of UFC and Bellator and MMA events and press conferences, which was kind of cool. I got a chance to interview like Chael Sonnen, John Jones, Joe Rogan, Dana White, Conor McGregor before he really popped off. Which so it was really cool as a fan. It was really cool to just take that reporting skills that I learned and apply them to a beat that I was really excited and interested in. So yeah, I did some other kind of random stuff in between. After I left the Post, I even did some work, PR stuff in the film industry. If anyone's aware of Troma, they're an independent film company that's based out of Long Island City in Queens, and I did some work for them for a few months. They hit like The Toxic Avenger and Class of Nukem High. I'm a big horror movie fan. We'll probably talk about that on this channel a little bit here and there as well. And I was always a big fan of Troma and just horror movies in general. And I got a chance to do some PR stuff for them and some kind of production stuff for them, working for a few months, which is cool. But that's for another video. There's definitely some stories and not so great ones that came out of that. But this is about journalism. So after some MMA and UFC reporting, after I left the Post, maybe about a year or two later, I ended up taking a job at People Magazine. So People Magazine, and this was really strictly online. This was digital. I don't think I really got anything in the actual magazine, but it was not necessarily something that I was interested in covering. I'm a straight male. This beat in this particular outlet had a focus on a lot more stuff that I wouldn't really necessarily be interested in. Celebrity stuff, fashion. One thing that I thought was really interesting was when I applied for the job, or when I was going through the interview process with people, is that they made a big focus on the royal family, the UK royal family, Kate Middleton, and all this stuff was going on. Like, how much do you know about this? Are you interested in this? Have you had any experience covering the royal family? Because it was a big part of the People Magazine's content that they like to cover. I guess their readership was really interested in the royal family and Kate Middleton and all this stuff. And I didn't really care whatsoever about it. But I remember actually like a writing prompt for the whole application and interview process. About one of the questions was about the royal family. They were super obsessed about it. And that was a big part of, a lot of what I did for People was like reality shows, obviously like music, stuff in movies, television, fashion, just kind of pop culture-y stuff. It wasn't really like my cup of tea, but one thing you learn as a reporter is that you kind of become a little bit of like, I guess, almost like a charlatan or like a sophist. You can be an expert enough on anything to write about it. You can kind of write a little bit about everything, and that's what you have to learn. I didn't care or even know a lot about these subjects, but I could write about them and I could report on them and I could put together news on it. And that's what I did. It wasn't, like I said, it wasn't my cup of tea completely, but it paid the bills, and it was definitely something that looks great on the resume. I'm proud of everywhere that I've worked for one reason or another. But after maybe I wasn't at People Magazine for very long before I got the call from Fox Business. And the one thing I will say, because it sounds like, wow, I've worked at a lot of places and I'm not really quite that old yet. In this day and age in the news industry, you could find yourself working for a lot of news outlets in a fairly quick amount of time. There's a lot of turnover in the industry in general, and especially about the next company that I'm about to get into where I worked. But just in general, it's just you go where the work is, and it can change, but gone are the days where you could be working for the same newspaper or news outlet and retire there after 20, 30 years. Those days are over. You are going to probably be working at quite a few different places before you finally throw in the towel and retire. Quite a few places in this industry. So be prepared for layoffs and cutbacks and stuff like that. The industry is obviously in a state of great change, and that's an entire video for another time that we can get into, that we will get into and we need to get into. But again, People Magazine was there for 6 months, did a lot of stuff in the television, movies, music, reality TV, royal family stuff. And then I got the job at Fox Business, and I took it. Um, so I will say, and I want to be very careful about how I talk about places. I don't want to get in any trouble. And again, I will say I'm proud of everywhere I've worked, and I'm not ashamed of any byline. Maybe there's a few that are better than others, but I'm proud of everywhere I've worked. But I will say, Fox and the New York Post have a reputation. They're owned by News Corp, which is owned by Rupert Murdoch, and they have a little bit of a little bit. They have a conservative bent, obviously. If you're not aware of that, you are now. They lean right on a lot of stories, editorial or otherwise. And I will say, and again, I'll be careful with my words here, but if you could say to yourself, I don't think it would be. I could see myself enjoying working at a place or a newsroom like Fox Business, or Fox News. You might be right. You probably that intuition and that impulse wouldn't be wrong. There was a lot of turnover at Fox Business Network. So at Fox Business Network, the coverage is what it sounds like: business, stock market stuff. Um, you know, Covering stuff on technology, science, health related, whatever has been going on. A lot of politics, because a lot of these things obviously are intersectional and have a political component to them. So you're working for Fox, you know what we're talking about politically here when we're talking about Fox. So there was a lot of turnover, a lot more than any other place that has been mentioned so far. Every day it felt like there was someone new either coming or going. There was a lot of turnover. You can imagine what the newsroom experience was like. It was high stress. And I'll stress, in general, in any newsroom, it's a Shark Tank. It's built for the strong. You have to be, it's sink or swim. If you can't swim, you'll get eaten alive. You have to have thick skin, not just for the news coverage. If you're assigned to knock on a door or call the mother of a son or daughter or her child was just murdered, or a family whose home just went up in flames and they've lost everything that they've ever owned and they've ever known. You have to be comfortable making those phone calls and knocking on those doors. And if you are considering becoming a reporter or a journalist, these are some things that you have to be comfortable with. You're going to be asked to do things that most people won't want to do, and they would be incredibly uncomfortable doing, and they are incredibly uncomfortable. It's never fun and it's never easy. You're going to get a lot of doors slammed on your face, but for every door slammed in your face, you might get, an exclusive front page story that just needs to be told, and it's just an amazing story. But you're going to be doing some uncomfortable stuff. But this goes beyond that. This is more not really the content so much at Fox Business that was distressing, so much as it just was just the general work environment, and just the pace and the kind of the personality of the newsroom. I would say was definitely it was pretty stressful, and I'm trying to be as careful with my wording as possible. But it was definitely, like, again, high turnover, a lot of stress. So think of that what you will, and take away what you will of that, about what that means for that particular institution, and why would there be a lot of high turnover at a place like that. These are questions that you need to ask yourself, that go on behind the news that you read, that go into the news that you're reading. These are the people that are writing the news and creating the narrative in the history as we know it. So I think that's a good place to leave off for now. We're about 25 minutes, almost nearly, into this video, and if you stuck with me this long so far, I commend you and applaud you, and I cannot thank you enough for your support in general. Again, if you like the content, this is really a lot of what we're going to be discussing: journalism, reporting, the news industry. We're going to get into a lot of other stuff too. We're going to launch a podcast within the coming days, a weekly podcast, and obviously just the regular content that'll be put up on this channel. And it's not all going to be journalism reporting, but that'll be the bulk, and it'll play a big role in what this channel is all about as it kind of finds its personality, and I continue to grow it. But there's a lot of stuff to unpack there, and there's a lot of stuff that we'll talk about going forward. But I think that to kind of give my story about where I've worked and my experiences in the news industry and some of the places that I've worked is important in lending some credibility to this channel and myself and any expertise in any stories that I discuss about the topic. So again, thank you for your support. If you enjoy the content, please subscribe and like this video. Share it as much as you can. We're really trying to grow this channel here. Any support would be immensely appreciated. And if you don't, that's cool too. I appreciate you stopping by. But thank you guys so much for watching the video. Have an excellent night. And until the next video, peace.